Good evening, and welcome to What's Your Story? My guest tonight was a very successful reporter for WVIT Channel 30 for many years prior to his retirement. During that time, he broke many important stories that happened in and around various towns in Connecticut. His accuracy, honesty, and bare-bones style were his trademark. However, the story of his life is a fascinating look behind the scenes at a life filled with struggle, pain, failure, and ultimate success. It is also the story of a man whose deep personal faith sustained and carried him through a gauntlet of life's toughest trials and tribulations. Welcome to the show, Lou.
Thank you. My pleasure indeed.
Thank you so very much. We are so honored to have you.
I'm honored to be here.
We are so honored to have you. So, you know, in the news business, you see people in front of the camera all the time. See them with the microphones, and if you're like me, you wonder what they're really like. Well, tonight, our viewing audience is going to get an opportunity to hear about your fascinating life story. So why don't we start it where it began? Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you were born?
I was born in Hartford, Connecticut in 1942 at Hartford Hospital.
Hartford Hospital, 1942. What month?
February 19th, 1942.
All right now. You know what's your birth sign? What is that?
You know, at one time it was a groove to know the birth signs, and not, to me, I don't. But Pisces.
Pisces, yeah.
I'm on the cusp.
Okay. All right. Okay.
And between Pisces and Aquarius.
All right now. All right.
Now, what does that mean, Jim?
I don't know.
I don't know.
How many siblings do you have, and would you please tell us about them?
There were 10 in my family. My oldest sister died in infancy there in Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay.
And I've got 4 living now, 5 including myself.
Okay.
And very successful, and I'm so proud of them, my brothers and sisters. And you know, we're an old age family in terms of I'm 77, and my baby sister is in her 60.
You better not say that.
No, not publicly.
That's right. Give your siblings a shout out here, Lou. Give them a shout out.
How much love I have. I'm so proud of them. I'm Bob, and who worked in education.
Yep.
And then there's Dolores, who still works for a firm, and then there's Donna, and she's retired from the insurance industry. Then there's my brother Clarence, worked for the city of Hartford, hardworking man. And then my other sister Tanya, we stay in touch often, and of course we miss our siblings. Sure. Who are now dancing with our ancestors.
Absolutely, yeah. Where were you in the group of children? Where do you fall?
4th.
You're 4th?
Yes.
4th out of 9?
Out of 10.
4th out of 10?
Yes.
Okay. How many boys, how many girls?
Well, 7 boys and 2 girls, as I remember, but 3 girls. We had a baseball team.
Okay.
They used to tease my dad about that. We had a baseball team.
There you go.
Common at that time.
Absolutely.
It's something to do with African American families at that time and other ethnic families. You had many kids. Some were to carry on with the work and things like that, Irish, Italian.
Sure.
Typical, the American family.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now, okay, most people remember these days. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Hartford Public High School, the public schools of Hartford. Now, everything is relative, and relative in terms of my public school education was dynamic, where teachers demanded things from you, and they had high expectations for you. Imagine
that, huh?
That was like the system. In the north end of Hartford, Arsenal School, from kindergarten to 5th grade, I think it was. But then going on to junior high, I got sick that summer. But it was the educational factor. That's why it's so darn important to me now. Insist on people getting an education. No one can take that away from you. And sometimes it's not all degrees, sometimes just some common sense that you take with you. But no one can deny the benefits of education by any means necessary.
Were you a victim of corporal punishment in school by the teachers during that period?
Well, yes.
In a word, yes.
Well, because of the fact that at home, my dad was working in a foundry. My mom was raising kids, and she did work sometime, housework.
Yes.
With dignity.
Yes.
And she worked in some firms in Hartford. But we didn't call it corporate punishment. It was called obeying your mom and dad, family, and the things that my mom and dad did, and there was not a whole lot of hitting when you could not do today. I found that out myself, in terms of teaching manners, no matter where you're at, whether you be on welfare, no fare, the family pride factor. Our family pride was typical of many African Americans that were mentioned in Ida B. Wilkinson's The Warmth of Other Suns.
Okay.
What that meant. Sometimes what it meant, the discipline factor was that. My mom from Georgia, right? When you left the house, make sure you put on clean underwear.
Get hit by that truck, right?
Can you imagine? But you never question it.
Yeah.
Say, Mom, well, you're representing this family.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're representing this family.
Yeah.
From public housing development in the north end of Hartford.
Yes.
Again, everything being relative in that. But you wonder sometimes, Mom, what does it, if I get hit by a car or no? Well, if you get hit by a car and go into an ambulance, you got to make sure you got clean underwear on.
Absolutely.
Think about that.
I do. I was told the exact same thing. So I had the same kind of upbringing
Discipline.
as you.
Yes.
Speaking of upbringings, where did you live growing up, and how did that impact you?
My family lived in Bellevue Square. That's a public housing development in the north end of Hartford, zip code 06120. And we were like a family. It was kind of like, as I talk with some of my former playmates who are still around, and it was the same thing in terms of family structure, and I don't doubt that there were some dramas going on within, but there were some dysfunctional families. But in the main, it was like if your mother said to me outside, Lou, yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Not first names. Never used first names.
With adults, yes.
With adults.
Yeah.
Never used first names. And that was the village of Bellevue Square, which we call the Brickyard. And again, I refer to Ida B. Wilkinson's in Hartford. At that time, with that great migration, we moved to what is called the Bottom. Had its own world, the Bottom. And then gradually, with the more African Americans coming from the South, we would move further west, if you will. So what happens is, this is in Hartford, in the North End. So from the Bottom, we moved up to Donald Street, Old Donald Street, but it's no longer here. I've got such fond memories. And the migration of African Americans in large numbers, that's what it was, the larger numbers. Mm-hmm. You could see the differences in terms of the housing patterns, which we now are able to identify in a book, The Color of the Law, written by Richard Rothstein, talking about redlining, mm-hmm. all those issues. And we came through it, and still we rise.
Still we rise.
And it was a wonderful time. I mean, back then in the north end of Hartford, different ethnic backgrounds, Irish, Italian, Jewish mainly, and some books that have been written by the Jewish Federation talk about that area that we were born in, where most of the merchants were Jewish. And I won't say we got along, we respected each other as human beings.
Did you socialize?
Well, yeah. Well, to a certain extent. I mean, because, like those of Jewish of the Orthodox faith say the Orthodox faith. But we got along. And I think the reason was we got to know each other on a human level. It was fantastic. From high school to junior high school, some of my friends today, like are from my old neighborhood, the Clay Hill area at the north end, and so you learn how to judge people by the content of their character
instead of the color of their skin.
I asked a friend who we're still close and former Hartford Police Chief Bernie Sullivan, who's my kids call him Uncle Bernie. Just one example in that regard. I said, Bernie, what was it, man? He said, Lou, we were all poor together. He said we were all poor. Your dad working, mom, but we were all poor together. In a sense of finances, but not in moral values.
Yeah, and not in family love and togetherness.
Without question.
Absolutely, yes.
But I had a wonderful childhood, even as things happened in my life where I got very sick as a preteen.
Yeah, we're going to get to that, yes.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say that your memories of that period, the impact of living in the Bellevue Square area in a multicultural environment was a most positive experience for you.
Yeah, well, without question, what happened was that now Bellevue Square at that time was predominantly African American.
Okay.
Or black, whichever you choose. But outside of the area, contiguous, there were some neighborhoods that were poor. And they were Italian, Irish, and I hate to use that term poor because in a sense of financially, but like I said earlier, otherwise it was moral values, man. If not in the home, in the churches at that time.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because the black church has played such a pivotal role in the life of the black community. I mean, our leaders,
without question,
many of our early star singers came out of the church.
Certainly.
Yeah, Aretha Franklin, many of the Temptations were originally singers out of the church.
But the black church, the history of the black church is so phenomenal in terms of what it meant.
Yeah, how it sustained.
Well, the black churches they were a nucleus and they kept people together, but they also invested in land, invested in business. I mean, the story of the.
That's a whole 10-hour show right there.
But it has. I spoke this last February at a church, and what happened? I did my homework, and I was utterly fascinated by it. Even those churches, the black churches, early on, during the Jim Crow area.
Yes.
Before Emancipation Proclamation.
Yep.
The black churches were the nucleus. Somehow it got lost along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you told when I initially had a chance to sit down and talk with you, I came with the misguided idea that we would primarily talk about your WVIT Channel 30 career. And I was quickly set straight. And you told me that, no, there's a whole nother story here that I really want to talk about. And I'm happy that I took that advice and listened to it. One of the things you told me was a tragic story involving your grandfather. Would you share that with our viewing audience, please?
My father was born and raised in Denmark, South Carolina. And my grandfather was a no-nonsense man. When I say no-nonsense, bright man, hardworking man. My grandfather had a watermelon patch. In fact, his nickname was Watermelon Brown. And that has been passed on to my son. My son is proud to say I'm the grandson or great-grandson of Watermelon Brown. And so what happened was, and my grandfather's story is that his watermelon from his patch was stolen by a linesman who worked for the utility down there who was black. My grandfather went to court and he saw the situation where it was going. And I said he was a no-nonsense man. It's documented, by the way. He came out shooting. So he ended up being fatally wounded. But at his last breath, as the family lore told,
Family lore, yes, yes.
that he turned when he was mortally wounded and he shot and killed the black man who had caused his demise. My grandmother, God rest her soul, my grandmother, what a powerful woman. Her last name was Anderson. My grandfather had 9 siblings. And what happened was, they were told by the ignorant people down there who killed my grandfather, all of you Browns, take the first, fastest thing leaving out of here. And if anybody come get Mr. Brown's, they didn't call him, they didn't see him, my grandfather's body, we kill you. Now, that's documented in a book.
Okay.
Now,
yes.
by news accounts and family laws, you got to put them together to get to the truth of the matter, or as near as possible. My grandmother is told, went out there with a wheelbarrow and got her husband's body from out there in the street.
Wow.
Despite the warning.
Yeah.
Well, all of the Browns in that family tree that I emanate from, they left. But guess what they did?
What did they do?
They left land down there.
Okay.
They had land down there.
All right.
They left the land.
They left the land, yeah.
And my grandmother, with her 9, or her 3 kids, 6 kids. 3 from Mr. Brown, and then 3 from another marriage after Mr. Brown was killed, Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes died, and my grandmother was provided a car to go to Trenton, New Jersey. That's where all the Browns had landed after leaving Denmark, South Carolina.
Denmark, South Carolina.
And I'm telling you that they established their own church.
Of
Macedonia.
course. Okay, Macedonia.
They're in Trenton, New Jersey,
All right.
which is still there in Trenton, New Jersey.
All right.
Don't. I can get going. I've done my homework only because of the fact that when we know who
Right.
and whose we are,
Yep.
you stand taller.
Yep, you do. You do. Yep.
You
Absolutely,
stand
you do.
taller.
Now, Lou, when you were 12 years old, you were beset with some serious physical ailments. Would you please talk about
Without
that?
question. What happened was, because I think there was that was a pivotal point in my life. You say, why? We lived there in the inner city of Bellevue Square. I was diagnosed with rheumatic fever,
Okay.
liver trouble, kidney trouble, and heart trouble.
All in the same year.
At the same time.
Same
The
time.
first diagnosis in that short, because my mom came home from work.
Yes.
God rest her soul. She worked in the hospital, I think it was. But she came home on a Saturday morning. I'm doing my chores. Everybody had to do their chores, right?
Absolutely.
So what
Yeah.
happened was, she said, "How you feel, baby?" I said, "Mom, I'm feeling good." My body the water had been retained in my body. I know there's a medical explanation for that. But what happened was, I went to Hartford Hospital, spent a month in a bed in Hartford Hospital where they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Then, for rehabilitation, I ended up going to New Haven or Hamden Children's Center at 1400 Whitney Avenue. I spent a year in the bed. 11 months in the bed. So it was a total of a year between Hartford Hospital. Can you imagine being a preteen, having to live in a bed? But in my mind, there was nothing wrong with me. But it was good. It was good intellectually, having to read and whatnot. And but what happened was that during that time the medical paradigm there was to 1 month you get penicillin shot in your backside.
You were a horse needle. Right?
The horse needle.
Yeah.
Or you get a nose and throat culture.
Oh.
And I can still remember when I would get the penicillin shots, you'd roll over in the middle of the night and you jump because of the pain. But I had the best delivery of health service that one could have.
And this was in Hamden.
In Hamden, and that facility is still there. I don't know if they're using it for now. But so from that experience, that's when I began to see things outside of my environment, if you will, of Hartford. Now, living in Hartford, I would walk all over the city of Hartford, man.
Yeah,
You dig what I'm saying? I could tell you the best Italian lemon ice.
Yeah, yep.
The best knish, the best,
All right, yeah.
corned beef and whatever. And there was that kind of getting along and knowing each other and having friends. And in my household, despite me having that diagnosis, I didn't think sick. My mother and they treated me what they could, but they, like we had our chores to do. And a good part of that, seeing another part of the world, ironically, by being sick, because many of the kids didn't look like me. They didn't look like me. And those who did look like me, they might have been Cape Verdean, West Indian. Let me tell you something, man, there's a difference. We come here in different ships. We're in the same boat now. That's what I used to say. That's what I learned being down there and learn about the Italian kids, the Irish kids. And we became true friends, true friends. And of course, the ignorance was there, but it never bothered me. You truly judge people by the content of their character. And being from Bellevue Square, like saying the exposure was, I attended a Naylor school, Naylor, down on Franklin Avenue, and everything being relative at that time. And then, going to summer camp at Harkness Memorial State Park.
Hold that thought, okay, Lou? That's all the time we have for tonight's show. This is part one of the Lou Brown interview. My thanks to my guest, Lou Brown. Everybody has a story. What's yours? Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, good night.